So I belong to a bunch of groups on Facebook, and one of the groups, somebody posted a really interesting question, and I answered it there in the group, but I thought it'd be really cool to ask people on YouTube your own opinions on this. So today we're going to be answering 3 questions. The first is what is the rarest game that you owned? The second is, what's the weirdest game that you own? And the third is, what's the most sentimental game that you own for any kind of reason? So let's start with the first question. All right, what's the rarest item that I own? Well, that's a tough one. So I'm not going to be going into expensiveness because it doesn't matter how much it costs. It's more what's the rarest thing, how many of these are there and how rare are they? So I picked 3 things of my collection which are probably the rarest. Definitely the first is the Hyrule Warriors Wii U NTSC or US North American, whatever you want to call it. This is the North American US release of Hyrule Warriors limited edition. You could only get this at the Nintendo World Store. I camped out. I made a video about it way back when it happened, when the game came out, and I got the game. And this, I believe there's only 200 or 250 of these ish in the world. So specifically the US version. And I've always tried to keep this in my collection just because it is so rare, and so that's definitely my most rare. Runner-up would probably go to either the Akamajo Dracula X68000, which is the Sharp X68000 version of the Castlevania Chronicles. Which you've probably played on the PlayStation 1. This is the original port of it. I mean, it comes on floppy disk, for crying out loud. So that's pretty rare. I have it complete in box and everything with the registration cards and everything. So don't have the system to play it on, but since I'm such a huge Castlevania fan, I wanted to get this in my collection. And I've had this for probably about almost 10 years. So it's definitely up there as far as rare goes, just because it came out for us, a system that, I'm sure it doesn't have a lot of surviving copies to this day. And the other one, which I think is probably the most rarest by number, but is not an official game, so to speak, is Castlevania 2, Castlevania the Lacard Chronicles 2. This is a fan game which came out. I'm hoping to actually stream this sometime this month to check it out. So the developers themselves sent me this game, which is awesome. The game comes with a, let me show you. Comes with a printed disc and everything. And, the game has been updated, so this copy is kind of like a moot point just because, it doesn't have the updated version of the game. But it's, got the manual and everything, so it's pretty cool. So this is definitely, I would say, the rarest, probably, because I can't imagine that there's that many copies of these floating around. I would imagine less than 20. So really cool that the developer was able to send that to me. So that's my rare games. Now, moving on to the second question, what's the weirdest game that I own? That's tough. I own a lot of weird games, but I picked a few, to kind of sift through. So here's the weird games. Now, I've talked about this one before, Bad Street Brawler. It's not a good game, but it's just so weird. It's just such a weird platform game, like action platformer. And, I don't know, it's made by Mattel. It's just really weird. I know it's not rare or expensive or anything, but to me, this is always one of the weirdest action platform beat 'em up type games on the NES. So that's that. I also picked Balljack, which I know I just reviewed it, but this is definitely one of the weirder games that I've ever tried out. Check out my review if you haven't seen it yet. I just posted it, and It's a sci-fi competitive sports game. You know, think Windjammers, but I don't know, with giant enemy crabs. I don't know what to tell you, but I think you guys will dig the review. So if you haven't already, definitely check that out. This is a weird game, but it's really fun. Really good game. The next is Katherine for the Xbox 360. This is my copy. I don't have like the crazy limited edition or whatever, but you know, this game, I picked it up for like $9 a while back, and this is an interesting little title. It's like a puzzle game. It's kind of like Cubert in a lot of ways, where you gotta, as far as like going on the actual puzzle layout, it's kind of like Cubert. It's like isometric as far as movement goes, and the whole purpose is you've got to climb these steps to get to this door, so that way you can exit out without being taken out by this evil witch lady person. I haven't finished playing through this. I only actually played the demo, and then I loved it so much I picked up the game. You know, probably about a year or two later when I found it used somewhere. And you know, it's got this whole like love triangle thing that's going on between two different women named Katherine and this guy who's kind of stuck in the middle of it, and some really bizarre dream type sequences. It's a weird game, but it's really cool, so definitely recommend it. All right, let's move on to the last category, which is what's the most sentimental game that I own. So I actually have a lot to show here, but I'm gonna try to keep it really brief. So when I was a kid, most of my games, like I had an NES, and when I got the Super NES, I kind of stopped playing my NES, and so my dad thought that was a cue for him to get rid of my NES. So he did. He got rid of my NES and all my games, and I was pretty furious at him for doing it. Since then, of course, I've reacquired everything, but along the way, moving over the years, I did end up finding a lot of really cool things from my childhood, which I never thought that I would ever see, or that I thought that they were lost to time. When I was a kid, I kind of threw out boxes and manuals. I didn't really keep them, just because I didn't know. So I'm gonna show you some things that I have had since childhood that I've kind of like, I don't know, I guess you could say reacclimated into my collection over the years. Things that I found that were my actual childhood copies, or my actual childhood things. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit in just a few minutes about some other stuff that I have as well, kind of taking all this apart while I do this. So the first is manuals. I have only 4 manuals from my childhood left as far as like NES goes. And they are Ninja Gaiden 2, Batman, a very disheveled and busted up Metroid, and also Legend of Zelda. The Legend of Zelda one is very interesting because I crossed out all the enemies that I encountered, which I always thought was really funny looking back on it. And there's also, I think at one point there's, flipping through this, yep, this right here, this used to be like old gum. I don't know what happened, but I accidentally got some gum stuck on these pages, so you could see the remnants of the gum. I did it when I was a kid. I must have put the gum down accidentally on the thing. Being a stupid kid, didn't realize that by putting something sticky like gum on the manual, I wouldn't be able to lift it off the manual and put it, I could put it back in my mouth, but it's gonna tear some of the manual out. So it's weird little things like this that really like remind me of childhood, and specific memories that I couldn't encounter with any other manual. I have Ninja Gaiden 2 as well. I don't remember, I didn't write anything in this one. And then Batman, I did write something. This is funny. So I must have gotten this game on, so I'm Jewish and I celebrate Hanukkah. So I must have gotten this game on Hanukkah, which must have been December 2nd back in 1991, because there's my handwriting from when I was a kid. And it says Hanukkah, December 2nd, 1991. And it's got my score count as well, which that's a pretty pitiful score. So yeah, it's just like, this is the kind of stuff that really it's very sentimental to me. It really brings back a lot of strong memories. I'm also going to link to a video that was a What Did Mike Tendo Get, which you may remember if you're a longtime viewer. I fairly recently, in the past few years, reacquired some of my original Super NES collection, my original carts, which of course, if I owned the car, I sold the cart. I sold the secondary copy that I have repurchased over the years, and I put my childhood cart that my friends sent me back into my collection. So I have those as my childhood copies, and so that video you could watch. I'll put it at the end of this video, actually, if you guys link it or you know, down below. So the last sentimental thing I wanted to talk about is actually any time that I had a composer sign something. So this was Kinyo Yamashita, the composer for Castlevania 1, and she signed the manual at MagFest, which is really cool. This one's really super nostalgic for me, this one right here, because it's my original copy of Perfect Dark from when I was a kid. The box and the manual and everything are not my original copies, but the game itself is. And I still have all my play time, all my play hours on this cart. I've beaten the game twice, and you know, I just have hundreds of hours playing this game. And this was signed by Grant Kirkhope, the composer, and that was again at MagFest at some point in time. So really cool. I mean, that in and of itself was super awesome. Just to have my original childhood cart signed, it's pretty cool. Next up, one of my favorite games of all time, Final Fantasy VII. I was lucky enough to meet the Earthbound Papas, one of which is a certain composer, Nobuo Uematsu. The entire Earthbound Papas signed my manual, but Nobuo Uematsu signed it as well, because, you know, he's a member of the Earthbound Papas. So yeah, pretty cool. And then the last one is an interesting story. So very few people know this, but Tommy Tallarico actually worked on Metroid Prime, and so he told me the story of how you know, he wasn't credited for it because they ended up going with a different composer, but he did the sound effects, and many of the sound effects are still present in the game. And so he signed my copy, and he put "Where's Tommy's credit?" and he signed it. So, you know, after he told me that story, I thought that was pretty funny. So yeah, pretty cool. And the reason why I met Tommy Tallarico was I was interning at a paper here in Connecticut, because I went to school for journalism, and I wrote an article for the video game years, and I was able to luckily interview Tommy Tallarico. And he invited me backstage after, you know, the interview, or interview was on the phone a few weeks prior, or a week prior, and you know, he gave me a free ticket to the show and VIP backstage pass. I was able to meet him, get a photograph with him. It was pretty cool. So you know, that was one of my earliest memories of meeting a video game music composer. So it's pretty cool. So that's it. I want to hear from you guys though. If you can, make a response video if possible, and go ahead and leave that in the comments. Leave a link in the comments below. If you can't do a video, no sweat. Leave a comment down below with again, your rarest game that you own, the weirdest game that you own, and what's the most sentimental game or game memorabilia that you own. That's it, guys. So I hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned, there's more on the way from the channel, and yeah, take care.